Hi, Dr. Reagan Robertson, CCO of Productive Dentist Academy here, and I have a question for you. Are you finding it hard to get your team aligned to your vision, but you know you deserve growth just like everybody else? That's why we've created the PDA Productivity Workshop. For nearly 20 years, PDA workshops have helped dentists just like you align their teams, get control of scheduling, and create productive practices that they love walking into every day. Just imagine how you will feel when you know your schedule is productive, your systems are humming, and your team is aligned to your vision. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. We can help. Visit productivedentist.com/workshop. That's productivedentist.com/workshop to secure your seats now.
Things are changing now where docs are not wanting to work 4.5 or 5 days. They want to make good money, but they're not so obsessed with, blowing it out, making $1 million a year. That's not to say that there are guys out there that don't want to do that. I'm just saying that it's just a little bit of a change.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Bruce B. Baird, and you're listening to the Productive Dentist Podcast. In this podcast, I will give you everything that I've learned over the last 40 years in dentistry, working with thousands of dentists. I'll tell you, it's not that my way is the only way. It's just one that has worked extremely well for me, and I'd love to share that with you, so you too can enjoy the choices and lifestyle that productivity allows. More time for things you love, increased pay, better team relationships, and lowered stress. Let's get into it with this week's episode of the Productive Dentist Podcast.
Hi, this is Dr. Bruce Baird with Productive Dentist Podcast. Again, answering questions from our listeners. And one person sent, one of my friends over in Fort Worth asked the question, can you explain the changing landscape of dental careers? Some people are doing things at midlife, some are waiting to the end of their career. What are you seeing, Bruce, as you continue to work with dentists across the country? And that's an interesting question. When I first got into dentistry, let's go back before that. My grandfather, as many of you know, Harry Lampa, you didn't know him, but he was my grandfather. There was a dentist in New York City and was best buds with Babe Ruth. But back in the day, back in the 50s and 60s, when a dentist sold their practice, they didn't sell it. They just asked a friend down the street if you would mind taking over my patients for me. And you would send your patients a letter and say, you're going to go see Dr. Wilson now or whoever. You just hung up the shingle. And that changed in the mid 70s. You started to see practices that were creating value. And in the 80s and 90s, where you would sell your practice to another dentist for anywhere from 65 to 85% of your previous year's collections. And we would see that, it depends on the kind of practice you have. If you had new equipment and you had nice facility and, you might get closer to 85% of your previous 12 months. And there were other formulas too. There were a lot of other formulas. I'm just using a generality when I say 65 to 85, because that's where it would fall. If you had old equipment and old stuff, then your practice might go for, 65% or even lower. That's just a range. And then we get to this time in the 2000s. And what I've noticed is the Gen Z and the Gen X, they have a little bit different philosophy. They're wanting almost to retire in practice. They want to work, but they also want their life. You go back to the baby boomers like myself. We just worked really hard and, learned it in the school of hard knocks. But I will tell you that many of our new docs that are coming through PDA now they're already planning their life. I mean, they're not just letting work plan their life for them, which is what happens to a lot of people. I can tell you that I did not take more than 1 week off for the first 35 years in practice. Except when I was in the military, I was able to take 2 weeks off or 3 weeks off because of just the structure and the way I was doing things. So, but things are changing now where docs are not wanting to work 4.5 or 5 days. They want to make good money, but they're not so obsessed with, blowing it out, making $1 million a year. That's not to say that there are guys out there that don't want to do that. I'm just saying that it's just a little bit of a change. And so this, when I look at DSOs and I look at the sale of dental practices, I was totally flipped out when I heard that the average dentist selling to a DSO is 41 years old. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. Why on earth would you sell your practice at 41 years old? But then as I researched, as I got to understand better what goes on in a DSO and what kind of salaries that someone could make, but with the sale of their business, maybe not their entire business, but maybe in a joint venture type arrangement, they can get a significant check that offsets their entire debt load, and still allows them to work and make money and do it in a different way. Whereas a lot of the dentists that are 55 or 60, now it's time they want to sell, but they're thinking to themselves, yeah, but I'm not going to make enough money on this sale. I've got to work longer. I've got to work harder. So you really have to step back and say, when do you start planning for your career and the end of your career? Well, you start planning today is what I would say. Start planning now for that. And the reason being, if you're looking at something in the future and you've got your sights set on it, then you'll at least know when you get there. If you don't know where you're headed, then the old adage that any road will get you there, because you're just going to end up where you end up. And I don't like that. I never liked that feeling. That's why I started doing 2 days a week. It was a game for me. I wanted to go from 4.5 days to 4, then from 4 days to 3.5. And I came up with a formula that if I increased my production per hour by $250 per hour, my own personal production, that would allow me to take a half day off. And that's exactly what I did. And then the 4.5 turned to 4, and then the 4 turned to 3.5. And man, I was really enjoying it. And the 3.5 turned to 3, and eventually it turned to 2. So that 2 days a week, I was still able to produce more dentistry than I did when I started, but it gave me the freedom to be able to do that. So when we look at the careers of dentists today, we have a lot of dentists that are just going straight to work in a DSO environment. Through the research that Dr. David Porritt, who is the CEO of Lampa Dental Group, who is a really close friend of mine, he did his thesis for his doctorate on job satisfaction of a dentist in a DSO. What he found was that 72% of the people that are in those DSOs across the country really would rather be doing something else. And to me, that's not a real good statistic when you'd rather do something else. But I think a lot of those are young dentists that have come right out of dental school that still have the thought in their mind that I'd love to open up my own practice. I'd like to start my own business. Great. Do I think it's possible to do it? Absolutely. There's no question about it. I don't care. DSOs are going to entail about 70% of all dentists when we look at that in the next 7 years. 7 years from now. So we're looking at a date. Let's just call it 2030. So 2030, 70% of dentists are going to be working for DSOs. But guess what? 30% aren't. 30% will be fee-for-service driven, high quality, high tech, high touch. Those are still going to be around. And I tell young dentists, I tell people I love young dentists. I just always have. And now I love old dentists too, because I'm an old dentist. So I'm kind of having fun getting the whole gamut. But I will tell you that yes, out of those 72% of people that aren't happy, they have the opportunity now to get some experience. I went in the military for 4 years. Now they're in a DSO environment and they learn to do things. And I will tell them, set aside 8% of your payroll. Set aside 8% and use that for CE. Learn. That's what you want to do. You want to make sure that your skill set is going to be ready when you decide to maybe open up your own practice. Or when your skill set gets better and better and better, guess what? You move up within the DSO environment that you're working in. So it's still about individual responsibility. It's still about, I want to be the best dentist I can possibly be, period. And that's something that I've always felt. I told my team, hey, if I'm not better this year than I was last year, it's time to tell me, because I want to improve every single year as being a dentist. And I still want to do that. I'm not practicing with my hands anymore, but I'm still learning about a lot of the new printing technology and the new all-on-4 stuff that we're doing. Why? Because I still have an interest in it. I'm still very, very interested in those things. So, and I want to be able to help dentists kind of make those right decisions. Now, if I'm towards the end of my career and I haven't prepared, this landscape, I haven't prepared for my retirement. I was expecting to sell my practice. And now you have these DSOs that are coming out and saying you have to work another 5 years. That's tough for some guys. I really didn't plan on that. There are some out there that will allow you to work 3 years. I actually believe it's a transition for you anyway, so that's not a bad thing. And right now, how do I increase my production? Before I sell to a practice, before I sell to a DSO, I'm 58 or 62 or whatever, set aside 3 to 4 years to focus on growing your business, growing your EBITDA, growing your profits. By doing that, it's going to increase your multiple. It's going to increase the amount of revenue you're going to get for your practice. And it can help you shore up your needs for retirement. And it can be done in a very short period of time. I'm telling you, we're working with docs that within 6 months to 9 months, they've already doubled their practice value. Now, what does that mean? If you double your practice value and you get a 5X, you got a 5X, but if you double your practice value, you just got a 10X, even though it was a 5. So if any of that makes sense, but it's something that we're going to see in the future. And we have a lot of older docs, but we also have younger docs that come to PDA. So I hope this has been an interesting topic. There's no real right answer for what to do mid-career or at the end of the career. I just know that my preference would be start to retire in practice for 15 years like I did. I had time to do all the things I wanted to do and spend time with kids and grandkids and enjoy life, because the older you get, what you start realizing is you're not going to be around forever. And you start realizing that, hey, none of my buds that have passed would have said, I wish I would have worked another 10 years. They just don't say that. So anyway, God bless you guys. I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Productive Dentist Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, make sure you subscribe. Pass it along to a friend. Give us a like on iTunes and Spotify, or drop me an email at podcast@productivedentist.com. Don't forget to check out other podcasts from the Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentistpodcast.com. Join me again next week for another episode of the Productive Dentist Podcast.